5 months after the divorce, I got a text from Diana. "Justin, Machi is missing." Machi was a cat I bought during our marriage. Diana was never home, so he was my only company. But when we split, Machi chose her. We had stood on opposite sides of the room with Machi in the middle. Without a second of hesitation, he ran straight to her. As Diana picked him up to leave, she smirked. "See, Justin? Even the cat won't choose you." She was right. No one ever chose me. I typed out several long responses and deleted them all. Finally, I sent, "We're divorced. Don't contact me about this stuff anymore." Diana replied, "You don't want Machi anymore?"
No, iyan suarat.
A long silence followed before she sent one last message. "You don't want Machi, and you don't want me either?" I didn't. Before I finally agreed to the divorce, Diana hadn't stepped foot in our house for 3 months. Still, I heard about her constantly through the tabloids. As the heiress to the Smith fortune, her flings with various actors and influencers were always front-page news. It was hard to miss. There were so many rumors that it was hard to tell what was real. But one thing was certain. Diana was punishing me. She was punishing her arranged marriage husband for suffocating her freedom and for supposedly driving the man she actually loved out of the country. My mother-in-law remained polite because of our family's business ties, but my own father didn't hold back. Every time he called, it started with a lecture. How did I raise such a pathetic son? You can't even keep your own wife under control. I thought about it for a second. Then I gave him a serious answer. It's probably genetic, Dad. Mom couldn't keep you under control either, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have ended up with a bastard son only 3 months younger than me. My father exploded on the other end. I heard the sound of porcelain shattering against a wall. The usual insults followed. "You ungrateful brat. Do you even care that I'm your father? And you're just like your mother." It was all meaningless noise. I hung up and closed my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit me. I rubbed my temples, trying to soothe the headache, but my mind drifted back to the morning's headlines. Heiress Diana Smith spotted late night with rising star. Actor flaunts luxury watch, are wedding bells ringing? The post featured a photo of the actor. He had a sharp, handsome face. He looked exactly like my damn half-brother, which meant he also looked exactly like the man Diana truly wanted but couldn't have. He was just a look-alike substitute. No wonder Diana had given him that limited edition watch, the one she'd bought for a fortune years ago and kept locked in the back of her safe. I scrolled back to the post. The comments were full of fans gushing over them. "Congrats to Ethan. They look so good together. I'm totally shipping this. Ethan is about to marry into the elite." One person tried to push back. "Elite? Keep dreaming. He's just a boy toy to her." The fans immediately swarmed him. "Are you blind? Do you know what a luxury watch like that means to a man?" A watch? I had one too, but mine was picked out by Diana's assistant. It was huge and expensive, befitting the status of a son-in-law to the Smith family. But that was all it was, a badge of office. At our small, private wedding, Diana had slid it onto my wrist with all the enthusiasm of someone filing a tax return. I kept scrolling through the arguments in the comments until one caught my eye. People only put effort into gifts for the ones they actually love. It wasn't news to me that Diana didn't love me. And yet, in the silence of the night, I couldn't sleep. The clock on my phone ticked toward 3 a.m. The darkness was heavy, and the silence of the house felt like it was drowning me. Just before 4 a.m., Machi started racing through the halls. He knocked something over, the crash echoing through the quiet house. I got out of bed, intending to put him in his carrier. But as I reached for him, Machi hissed and lashed out, leaving several bloody gashes across the back of my hand. Before I could react, he darted into Diana's bedroom. That room was forbidden territory, a place she'd made clear I was never to enter. Machi knew that. Whenever he didn't want me near him, he'd hide in her room to get away from me. I stood outside her door for a long time. I didn't go in. Instead, I went downstairs alone to find some antiseptic and cotton swabs. After cleaning the scratches, I sat on the sofa. Machi never came back out. I watched the sky slowly turn from black to gray. At dawn, Diana called. Justin, what is it going to take for you to sign the papers? Her voice was cold, devoid of even a hint of warmth. It had been this way for 5 years. Suddenly, I was just tired. Tired of waiting, tired of compromising, tired of failing. There was never going to be any affection between us. Rather than dragging us both through this misery, it was time to get out. I looked up at the door that would never open for me and said, "Come home. I'll give you my answer." Diana must have been terrified I'd change my mind, because she was at the house in less than 30 minutes. She walked in and sat on the sofa furthest away from me. "Fine," she said bluntly. "What are your terms?" I hadn't seen her in 3 months. She was still beautiful, the kind of woman who looked like a movie star even in casual clothes. I used to want to tell her how pretty she was, but after being mocked for it a few times, I'd learned to keep my mouth shut. Now, all that was left was a cold business transaction. The terms I laid out were steep, and Diana hesitated. She took so long to decide that my stomach started to cramp with hunger. I grabbed a piece of bread from the fridge and ate it while reminding her, "If you don't agree now, I might change my mind about the whole thing." Diana froze for a second. Finally, she gripped her hands into fists and agreed. I made her promise she would never marry Ethan, or she'd have to give me half of her shares in the family company. She chose the former. Ethan was the actor from the tabloids. He'd somehow gotten my number a few months ago and sent me a taunting text. "Justin, the one who isn't loved is the real intruder here." My father's mistress had said the exact same thing to my mother once. I hated that phrase, and I hated people like them. The assets were split quickly. My father had never given me much. Almost everything we had belonged to the Smith family. I didn't want any of it. The only point of contention was Machi. I'd bought him right after I moved into the Smith mansion because the house felt too big and lonely. He was a round, fluffy ragdoll. Even if he wasn't particularly affectionate toward me, he'd been my only companion for hundreds of nights. Looking at him was the only thing that made me feel human. I wanted to take him with me, but Diana said, "Machi is marital property." She tapped her slim, manicured fingers on the marble tabletop. Her eyes narrowed with a flicker of malice. She was determined to win this. I knew this was her revenge for the ultimatum I'd given her about Ethan and the shares. She'd been forced to give up her lover. She was bitter, and she wasn't going to let me walk away happy. She wanted me to feel the pain of losing the only thing I loved. We ended up in a shouting match. Finally, I asked her, "Why can't you just let me have this one thing? My only source of comfort?" Diana's lips curled into something that looked like a smile, but her eyes remained cold. "I warned you when you manipulated your way into this family," she said. "I told you then, in this marriage you get nothing." I had tried to explain 1,000 times. My father was the one who drugged her drink that night I was a victim to. Even when I found evidence, Diana refused to believe it. She thought my father was just taking the fall for me. She believed I had set the whole thing up and called the paparazzi to catch us together so she'd be forced to marry me. After all, I'd liked her since we were kids. I followed her around like a puppy. In her mind, it made perfect sense that I'd drug her to get what I wanted. My love for her had become my greatest sin. I felt the fight leave me. I didn't want to argue anymore. I agreed to her suggestion. I placed Machi on the floor between us. Then Diana and I stood by our respective doors. As I stroked Machi's for one last time, I prayed, "Choose me." Since my mother died, I'd had almost nothing that truly belonged to me. I was the one who bought Machi. Diana never lifted a finger to care for him. In my heart, I felt he was mine. I hoped just once he would choose me. But Machi didn't even look at me. He ran straight to Diana. She knelt down and scooped him up. Before she walked out, she couldn't resist one last dig. "See, Justin? Even the cat won't choose you." It wasn't the meanest thing she'd ever said to me. She'd said much worse while trying to force the divorce. After all, she didn't love me. I had loved her once. But after years of being ground down, that love had finally turned to ash. Diana had long ago forgotten the promises we made as children. It was time for me to go. No cat, no Diana, and no house that never felt like a home. Diana had been careful. When we married, we had a solid prenuptial agreement. I left with nothing from the Smith estate. When my father found out I'd divorced her in secret, he cut off all my cards. The little money I had left was only enough to rent a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in an old complex on the outskirts of the city. To get to my building, I had to walk down a long, narrow alleyway. At night, the only light came from a few flickering street lamps. I noticed a woman there who often met her boyfriend when he got off the night shift. She was always accompanied by a sleek Savannah cat. The cat would trot along with its tail held high, greeting its owner with a purr. I'd see them whenever I walked home with my grocery bags. There was also a stray tortoiseshell cat in the neighborhood that watched them with envy. One night, the stray worked up the courage to approach them. The Savannah cat hissed at it. The stray tried to hiss back. The woman suddenly kicked the stray hard. "Get lost. No one wants you. Go away." The tortoiseshell cat let out a pained yelp and scrambled under a parked car, too scared to come out. The couple walked away, but the stray stayed under the car. It didn't make a sound, it just sat there in the dark, looking miserable. "No one wants you either, little guy," I whispered. The cat didn't answer. I put some cooked shrimp near the car. The cat was too scared to move. I leaned down and caught a glimpse of its eyes. They were filled with such profound sadness. That night, the cat didn't come out. But in my sleep, I dreamed of a pair of eyes just as sad. I dreamed of being 6 years old. Back then, I didn't understand what a terminal illness was. I just watched my mother waste away in her hospital bed. When I asked what was wrong, she would pinch my cheeks and smile. "Mom is just getting too fat, so I'm going on a diet." But she was already skin and bones. How much thinner could she get? I would touch her sharp collarbones, my heart aching for her. Most of the time, she was silent. When she wasn't talking, I knew she was thinking about Dad. He didn't come often. Only his assistant, Sarah, would show up with supplements and fruit. Sarah would tell her, "Things are crazy at the office. Mr. Sterling just can't get away." Sarah was lying. I'd gone to the office to find him a few times, and he was never there. One day, I came back from the office to find a woman at the hospital with a boy my age. The woman told my mother, "Mrs. Sterling, the one who isn't loved is the real intruder." I didn't understand what it meant, but my mother started crying. I rushed forward and tried to push them out of the room, but I couldn't push away the darkness that had settled over my mother's heart. She gave up on life shortly after that. After the funeral, my father brought that woman and the boy home. "Justin, this is your new mother and your brother. We're going to be a real family now." I didn't want a new mother or a brother. I tried to fight for my father's attention, getting into scuffles with the boy, but I never won him back. I remember the weight of my father's hand as he slapped me across the face. He was screaming at me. The world went blurry. All I could see was a pair of weeping eyes. The next morning, I saw the tortoiseshell cat again. It was limping. I heard some neighbors gossiping. Poor thing. Its owner died in a car crash, and the girlfriend got a new boyfriend with a fancy cat, so she just dumped this one. Can you believe it? This leg is broken now. Probably won't last long. People sighed and shook their heads. Some threw it pieces of ham. But no one offered to take it home. The eyes from my dream and the eyes of that cat merged in my mind. I took the motherless child home. I spent every cent I had left at the vet. I had a cat again. A scruffy, soot-colored tortoiseshell. He was a rescue, so he was free. The surgery for his leg cost $300. Ironically, that was exactly what I'd paid for Machi. Machi was never affectionate. But Patches, I decided to name him Trey, since he cost me my last $300, loved to paw at my hand, begging for pets. I held Trey and whispered to him, "Just hang in there. Daddy's going to have money again soon." The Smith Group issued a public statement denying the rumors about Diana and Ethan. Ethan's number was blocked, but he used a burner to keep texting me. "Justin, this isn't over. Diana is going to marry me sooner or later." In the heat of their romance, Diana probably made him a lot of promises. But when big money is on the line, promises fail. Ethan couldn't beat a bottom line. I screenshotted his texts. I packaged them with a photo of my marriage certificate with Diana and sold the whole thing to a tabloid for 6 figures. The paparazzi turned it into a viral sensation. Rising star as the third wheel, actor exposed for homewrecking and taunting husband #. Diana's angry call came immediately. I was busy supervising the installation of a luxury cat condo for Trey. "Justin, have you lost your mind?" she screamed through the phone. "Was ruining my life not enough? You have to destroy Ethan too?" All I had done was give them the truth. But Diana never believed me anyway. I didn't feel like arguing and getting hurt again. I hung up and blocked her. Trey sensed my mood and trotted over, rubbing his head against my hand. "Don't be sad, Dad," he seemed to say. I picked him up. Trey didn't pull away like Machi used to. Instead, he gently licked the scars on my hand where Machi had scratched me. Slowly, Trey fell asleep in my arms. Before I could drift off, someone started pounding on my door. It was my childhood friend, Blake. I don't know how he found me. He looked around my cramped, shabby apartment and fumed. "You're a Sterling. Why the hell are you living in this dump with such an unusual-looking cat?" I pulled Trey closer. "Don't talk about my son that way." Blake didn't want to argue about the cat. "Your old man froze your cards and you didn't even call me?" "Why? Honestly, it was fine. The freeze was temporary. What belonged to me, they were going to have to give back eventually. My father was happy seeing me struggle. He thought it meant I'd crawl back and beg. Kept him from noticing what I was actually doing." I looked at Blake. "Is everything ready?" Blake dropped a heavy envelope on the table and patted his chest. "Guaranteed. This is enough to bury the old man." The envelope was filled with evidence of my father's tax evasion and illegal asset transfers. Blake and his father had been helping me gather this for 10 years. It was finally time to pull the net tight. I took the evidence to the authorities and reported my own father. He was taken away shortly after. The entire Sterling Global Group was thrown into chaos. Predictably, my stepmother tried to push her teenage son forward to take control. The board of directors was a mess. My stepmother was desperately pitching to them. "This is the CEO's son. He has to lead the company while his father is away." No one was buying it. I walked into the boardroom with Blake's father. He had been my mother's closest friend. Before entering that room, we had already visited every major shareholder. I had promised to sacrifice certain family interests to secure the board's support. Combined with the shares my mother had left me in her will, it was enough. My stepmother and her son were kicked out. But that wasn't enough. Not even close. I contacted the paparazzi again and sold them the real story of the previous generation's drama. Tycoons, affairs, secret children. The public ate it up. With my prodding, the scandal surrounding my father became even bigger than Diana and Ethan's. As the victim in both scandals, I was suddenly the center of public sympathy. Someone dug up the records of me being hospitalized with a ruptured eardrum after my father slapped me as a child. Others found out that I had been sent to a standard public high school while the stepmother's kids went to elite private academies. People posted side-by-side photos. Me in a generic hoodie, and my half-brother in head-to-toe designer gear. The internet rallied behind me. I used the momentum to solidify my position at the company. Taking over a conglomerate sounds glamorous, but it mostly involved endless late nights. I basically moved into the office and Trey came with me. One night, when I was exhausted, Trey dragged a bag of cookies across the floor and nudged them toward me. Meow. Blake, who was helping me rewrite a proposal, grumbled. "I'm working late too. Why does Trey only bring you snacks?" I handed him a coffee. "Maybe because you called him unusual?" Trey let out another meow, as if in agreement. Blake took a sip of his coffee. "Well, Trey is definitely better than that little traitor, Machi." I knew he was right, but there was no point dwelling on the past. I was too busy. Busy making sure my father got a maximum sentence. Busy tracking down the assets he'd funneled overseas, and making sure my stepmother ended up with nothing. The public outcry was deafening. After pulling her son out of school, my stepmother stormed into my office. "Justin, you've gone too far." I looked up from my meeting with the marketing team. I waved them out and threw a stack of photos onto the desk. Mrs. Sterling, you know exactly what you did back then. I'm actually being quite merciful. The photos showed a young Mrs. Sterling with a string of different men. She was a career gold digger. Only a fool like my father would have married her. She collapsed into a chair, her face pale. I watched her with a cold smile. Oh, there's more. When I first saw Ethan, I couldn't help but notice how much he looked like your precious son. I got curious, so I looked into it. She started to scramble backward, her eyes darting toward the door. You're lying. I don't know any Ethan. I laughed. Maybe you don't, but let me fill you in. I found out Ethan's mother was very close with your brother back in the day. The problem is, she was already married at the time. Her husband had a bit of a temper, served a few years for assault, I believe. I pulled out a DNA report and held it out to her. What do you think that guy would do if he found out the son he's been raising for 20 years isn't actually his? She snatched the report, tore it into pieces, and threw them at my face. You're a monster, Justin. You're making this up. Just wait until Ken gets back. He'll show you. Ken, my half-brother, Diana's true love. I wasn't surprised she was pinning her hopes on him. After leaving Diana years ago, Ken had managed to claw his way into the DC political elite circles. Very powerful connections. Too bad. Putting your faith in someone else is never a good idea. I didn't bother telling her that. She took my silence for intimidation and walked out with her head held high, calling me a bastard one last time. I sat back in my chair. Ken was barely keeping his own head above water. He wasn't going to save anyone. I had a whole file on Ken, evidence of him bullying classmates in prep school. The scandals were being suppressed for now, but in the elite circles, the word was already out. Ken was a social climber, and his new benefactors were already unhappy with his background and his fake credentials. He was in for a rough time. I was waiting for Ken to show up. Instead, I got Diana. 2 months after the divorce, this was our first meeting. She was there to defend Ken. She sat across the desk from me, her eyes burning with rage. Justin, is this your idea of revenge? I looked at her for a long time. I realized I felt nothing. When the love is gone, Diana was just a person. A slightly annoying one. The answer was obvious. Why ask such a stupid question? I nodded. Diana slammed her hands on the desk and screamed. They're your family. I know I loved Ken, but you don't have to take it out on him and his mother just because of me. If you want to hurt someone, hurt me. They're innocent. Don't drive them into a corner. It was amazing how much someone could overlook when they loved a person. I felt a surge of anger, then a dark sense of amusement. I picked up my coffee and threw it directly into her face. Diana, why have you forgotten? I've always hated Ken. I hate his mother. And I hate my father most of all. When we were kids, you promised to protect me. You said you'd help me take back everything. What happened? Why did you fall for Ken? We were supposed to be the ones who grew up together. I hated who Diana had become, but I still missed the girl she used to be. The time my father slapped me so hard I ended up in the ER. Diana had begged her parents to take her to see me. They'd come to the hospital. Diana sat by my bed and cried when she thought I wasn't looking. She was my only friend for years, until middle school. She went to an elite private academy, and my father, at my stepmother's suggestion, sent me to a rough public school. Suddenly, we were worlds apart. I was busy studying, working, and trying to build a future for myself. I thought she would wait for me. But in high school, Diana fell for Ken. She pursued him relentlessly. She never said she loved me, and I knew my feelings were one-sided. But after seeing how much she cared for me when we were kids, how could she love him? She could have loved anyone else, and I would have accepted it. But why the one person who tormented me? I wanted to ask her once. I went to her private school and watched the wealthy, beautiful students hanging out. Ken looked so polished, so confident. And there I was, in my cheap public school uniform, hiding in a corner. My insecurity was written all over me. No one even noticed I was there. Coffee dripped down Diana's face. She went silent. She didn't argue. She just wiped her face and walked out. I don't know what she was thinking, or if she felt even a shred of guilt. It didn't matter. Shortly after she left, I went to visit my father in jail. He had lost a lot of weight. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a graying, broken man. I wasn't there for sympathy. I was there for business. Are you sure you want to leave all your remaining shares to my brother, the kid who failed remedial math? My father glared at me with pure hatred. I'd rather give them to a brick than to an ungrateful dog like you. The expected answer. Understood, I said. I straightened my suit and left. The moment I stepped out of the prison, I sent the photos of my stepmother's past to the tabloids. Mercy? I'd lied to that woman. I was just waiting for the perfect moment to burn it all down. A week later, my half-brother was arrested for a hit and run. He was a spoiled, talentless brat. He was easy to manipulate. A little provocation about his mother's reputation was all it took for him to lose his mind and do something reckless. The arrest sent the internet into a frenzy. Then, Blake convinced a few of the guys Ken had bullied in school to come forward. I read the comments on my phone. God, the stepmother's whole family is trash. How did Justin even survive growing up there? I went to school with Justin. He was always studying, never went home. He lived like a normal kid. We had no idea he was actually a Sterling. So sad. Like father, like son. The dad is a monster too. Outside it was pouring rain. Finally, I could sleep peacefully. Ken was finished. Exiled was probably a better word. We met one last time. He was still arrogant, just like his mother. He stood outside my office and smirked. I guess you couldn't keep a woman, but you've got some talent for business, big brother. The last time he'd smirked like that, he'd said, Sorry, Justin. I accidentally stole your girl. Oh well, I guess my mom stole your dad's heart, too. I punched him back then and gotten locked in my room for a week. But now, my father was going to be locked in a cell for years. I swung my hand to slap him, but Diana rushed out and blocked me. She pushed me back and stood in front of Ken. Justin, Ken has lost everything. He's suffered enough. Don't forget, you're the reason we broke up in the first place. You manipulated us. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I clenched my fist and then let it drop. Diana, you can't force me to admit to something I didn't do. She didn't move. I can judge right from wrong myself. Stop this. Whatever happened between our parents shouldn't be Ken's burden. Besides, you know what you did to him. I took a step back. One last attempt at the truth. I didn't. How many times do I have to say it? I didn't buy any drugs. I didn't spike your drink. The server from that night even testified that I never touched your glass. Diana, why can't you believe me just once? In the end, I just watched her lead him away. The sun set, and the world faded into darkness. I still missed the girl from my childhood, but I hated the woman she became. Ken's retaliation was desperate. He had one of his friends post a call out online. Ken and Diana were the real couple back then. Why did Diana end up marrying Justin? Care to tell the truth about that night, Mr. Sterling? The friend even posted a love letter I'd written to Diana in 10th grade. Everyone knew you were obsessed with her. I didn't respond. They didn't need me to. The truth about the drugging incident started appearing everywhere. A paparazzi member even came forward. I was paid by the Sterlings to wait outside the hotel and take photos of Justin and Diana coming out of the same room. Public opinion began to shift. People started quoting philosophy. He who fights monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster. Others mocked me. Turns out Justin isn't such a saint after all. No wonder Diana cheated. Some people get what they deserve. Maybe his dad was right to hit him. The world changes fast. Those who live by public opinion often die by it. I knew that, and I was ready. Blake was panicking. He came over to my place. What do we do? I was holding a sleeping tray. Back then, I was too afraid to go to the police because I didn't want to ruin our long-term plan. And after all this time, I wasn't sure how to bring it back up. Ken just gave me the perfect opening. The next morning, I went to the police station. I reported a cold case. A father drugging his own son to force a marriage. I still had all the information on everyone involved from that night. With the internet already buzzing, the investigation moved fast. The results were undeniable. My father and stepmother had orchestrated the entire thing. I had nothing to do with it. The police issued an official statement. The internet flipped again. Justin's life is a tragedy. Betrayed by his father, hated by the woman he loved. Finally, the truth is out. Is delayed justice really justice? Look at everything he lost. A few skeptics remained. Maybe the CEO is just taking the fall for his son? They were quickly shut down. Are you kidding? They hate each other. And the stepmother was involved. This was a setup. People posted endless proof of the rift between me and my father. I knew Blake was behind most of those posts, but the final blow came from an anonymous source. I can't watch this anymore. Here's what really happened. A masked figure with a voice changer posted a long video. He claimed to be part of Ken's old friend group. Ken is a vindictive guy. He hated Justin because Justin once called him out for being a secret child when they were kids. He vowed to take everything Justin had. He used to brag to us about how he'd trick his dad into punishing Justin or cutting off his allowance so Justin would be too scared to come home. When he found the love letter Justin wrote to Diana, he got a new idea. He didn't even like Diana. He just wanted her because Justin did. It was easy for him. He's a natural manipulator. He had Diana chasing him for 3 years. But even while they were dating, he was looking for someone better. Eventually, he found a girl from a powerful DC family. He wanted to break up with Diana, but she wouldn't let go. So he encouraged his dad to drug Justin and Diana and call the paparazzi. That way, Diana would have to marry Justin. The Sterlings would gain the Smith family's influence, and Ken would be free to chase the DC girl. After it happened, he went to Diana crying, saying he had to step aside for his brother. Then he came back to us and bragged, "Diana hates Justin now. If I can't have her, no one gets to be happy." The video included chat logs and a timeline that matched perfectly. The person ended with one last sentence. "Ken, don't blame me for turning on you. You shouldn't have slept with my wife." The internet exploded. Suddenly, everyone was sending me messages of support and sympathy. Blake came over ecstatic. They turned on each other. "I can't believe it actually cleared your name. But I'm confused. Why would Ken risk everything to go after his friend's wife when he had so much else going on?" I turned off my phone screen and looked up. "It wasn't an accident," I said calmly. "The person who went after the friend's wife wasn't Ken. It was Ethan, the actor. I had used the DNA evidence to blackmail Ethan into seducing Ken's friend's wife. Then I made sure photos were taken, photos where Ethan looked just like Ken, in very compromising positions. I sent them to the friend. I knew they'd tear each other apart. Diana came to see me. She looked like a child who'd been caught doing something terrible, small, unsure, and awkward. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I misunderstood you for so many years." I had waited 5 years for those words. Nearly 2,000 days and nights. I still remembered the day I woke up in that hotel room. I had no idea what had happened, and Diana was pointing a finger at me, screaming, "How could you be so disgusting, Justin?" I took a deep breath, pushing down the bitterness. Back then, she wouldn't listen to me. When the marriage became a done deal, I tried to make the best of it. I thought maybe it's not so bad. We're close now. If I'm kind enough, maybe she'll come around. I looked for evidence to prove my innocence. I tried to talk to her. I thought we could find a way back to each other. But we only drifted further apart. She started drinking, clubbing, and never coming home. The tabloids were full of her affairs. I looked at her now. She was still beautiful, but she felt like a stranger. I couldn't find the girl I remembered anywhere in her face. I stood in the doorway of my apartment. The sun was setting behind me, casting a long shadow. Diana looked into my small, shabby rental and her expression softened into pity. "Why are you living in a place like this? It's not safe. Come home with me. Let me make it up to you. Let's start over." How do you start over after that? I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I remembered all the nights I'd spent alone, gripping my fists and telling myself, "It'll get better. The truth will come out. And when it does, she'll have to make it up to me." I'd waited so long that I'd changed my mind. "We can't go back, Diana," I said. She refused to leave. I had to call building security to escort her out. A week later, I got a text from a mutual friend. "Justin Machi is missing." It was Diana using his phone. I thought about Machi, the tiny ball of fur I'd raised. The cat that had walked away from me without a backward glance. I typed and deleted a dozen things. Finally, Diana, we're divorced. Don't contact me about this stuff anymore. She replied, you don't want Machi anymore? No. A moment later, you don't want Machi, and you don't want me either? No. I had other things to do. Things more important than romance. My revenge wasn't finished. Without Diana's protection and with his friends turning on him, Ken was nothing. He came to beg me for mercy. I handed him over to the victims of his prep school bullying. I have more than enough money to fund their lawsuits against you, I told him. You're going to pay for what you did. More and more victims came forward. I had my legal team organize everything. I wasn't going to let that evidence go to waste. My father and half-brother were sentenced within months of each other. I personally delivered the news to my stepmother. How does it feel to lose everything? I asked. She screamed and tried to lunge at me, but security held her back. She was eventually committed to a psychiatric facility. Since I was technically her son on paper, I was the one who signed the papers. She can stay there. I sold everything in the Sterling mansion that belonged to my father, my stepmother, and their kids. I donated the proceeds to charity. Then I renovated the whole place. I moved back into the house my mother had designed, with Trey by my side. I chose the master suite on the 3rd floor with the most sunlight, instead of the tiny room I'd been relegated to as a kid. Trey had the run of the place. He'd zoom around the house and then come curl up next to me. Later, while driving through Diana's neighborhood, I saw a scraggly, dirty ragdoll. It was Machi. He ran toward me and rubbed against my leg. He was more affectionate than he'd ever been. Why is it that love is only given after it's too late? I've always hated the taste of expired candy. I called someone to pick him up and return him to the Smith estate. Machi meowed and struggled as they carried him away. But I didn't look back. I was busy heading toward a much brighter tomorrow. Side story, Diana's perspective. I made a promise to a boy once, and I broke it. I forgot my word. I fell for the brother of the person he hated most. He avoided me for 7 years. Then, after college, we woke up in bed together. I was convinced he had drugged me, that he'd driven Ken away and forced me to marry him. I told myself I could never love a man that manipulative. But he was so gentle that there were moments when I almost gave in. I told myself, Diana, don't forget what he did to you. If you love him, you're betraying Ken. I couldn't let myself love him. To numb the guilt, I started acting out. I flirted with actors, went to bars, did anything to hurt him. But I never actually let anyone touch me. I just wanted to punish him. I begged him for a divorce 100 times. But the day he finally said yes, why did it hurt so much? I saw him sitting in the corner of the kitchen, eating a plain piece of bread, and I had a flash of memory. Why couldn't I remember where I'd seen that before? My chest felt tight. I told myself I was just angry he'd forced me to choose between Ken and my company. So I took his cat. It was the first time I saw his eyes go red with tears. I should have been happy, but I felt like I was suffocating. The next time I heard about him, he had taken over Sterling Global. And then the truth came out, piece by piece. He hadn't drugged me. It was all Ken's plan. I looked at Ken and felt nothing, no spark, no love, only a burning rage at being played for a fool. I realized that love and hate had flipped. The reality I'd refused to see was now the only thing left. I had loved Justin all along. Fate is a cruel joke. What did those 5 years of misery even mean? If I were him, I'd hate me too. And he did. He wouldn't forgive me. He didn't even want the cat back. He had a new cat now, one that actually loved him. And later, he had a new partner, Lily, and a child. I'm the only one left trapped in the past. Every day, I watch Machi sit by the door, waiting for him. I realize now that the punishment I tried to give him was actually a life sentence for myself. Every time I look at the cat, I see Justin. And I remember being a little girl, holding his hand and saying, "Don't be scared, Justin. I'll protect you." Side story, Trey's perspective. After my first dad died, my mom threw me away. I thought I'd never have a home again. Then I met a handsome man who took me to the hospital when my leg was broken. While I was in surgery, my first dad came to me in a dream. He told me, Trey, forget about that woman. I found a great guy to be your new dad. Be a good boy and love him for me. Okay? My new dad calls me Trey. It's a good name. Trey has a new dad now.